Once again, here to do some writing, doing something a little bit different today. Oh, oh, there we go. I need a new window. This is just on YouTube right now, but I've got this awful tendency to work on something big projects, big writing, aspirations, and eventually I reach a point where I feel like I've lost the plot, that I'm no longer on track, that what I'm writing isn't making any sense, and because it gets to a certain size, like it requires reading it to someone entirely or going over the entire thing myself, and that can be a little bit daunting. So, let's see. All right, so I got that. And then start all. Okay, so what I'm doing today to show off how I use AI in this type of situation, because I've reached the point in the story where I'm like, have I gone too far? Is this off track? Is this not good? And I need a readjust. I need a little bit of positivity to let me know that the story is developing the way it's supposed to. Because what originally happened is I set it up to write 17 chapters in total, plus one chapter for the final chapter, so 18. 17 being at about 3,000 to 4,000 words is what I had intended. And chapter 2 blew up and told me it was like, this is 4 chapters, not just one. And I had 20 characters set up, and then in order to write this effectively and have like enough misdirection and enough depth for a mystery, for a whodunit, I had to add even more characters to the mix in order to fill that out. So that's the feature creep that I try to avoid. And then when I finally finished what was originally my chapter 3, which could very easily be chapters 7 and 8, maybe, it became obvious I had to write another chapter that wasn't in my outline, and I got that plugged in, and I finished that one yesterday. But now I'm to the point where I'm waking up this morning and I'm like, is this any good? Is this, have I fucked it up? Am I wasting my time? Is anyone going to want to read this? Is it actually interesting? I mean, all those doubts start to come up, which tells me I'm probably at about 1/3 of my story. Because that's about where I start to struggle with stuff. And ordinarily I would read it to somebody and I'd be like, tell me what you think, or something like that. And people can be problematic. People can want to steal glory, or in the case of my wife, they hear so many stories that are started and never finished that they're just done and checked out and don't want to hear anything that I produce until it's actually finished in its entirety. And AI helps. Now, the chat I've been using to assist with this, that's familiar with how I like my edit checks and gives me suggestions that I don't feel like it's trying to take over the project. Because if you don't keep AI reined in, it will try to write stuff for you. And I had some issue going over a short story that I'm working on with it, where it's like, you should do this instead of everything you just wrote. And I had to respond back with that sucks. And you're using words I would never use, and the cadence is wrong. Because the most important thing in writing, whether you're using AI or not, does it sound like you? Are you writing in a way that sounds like how you would talk? If not, stop. Just stop. Don't submit anything. Like it used the word calcify. I've never used calcify in a sentence other than like this one right here. And I even said like, okay, I never use the word calcify. You're adding language that I don't use. I'm going to try to use calcify in the next 24 hours. Was not able to work it into a sentence. Never had the opportunity where I can be like, well, that lesson calcified for me just fine. Never happened. It's not a word in my dictum. Dictum is a word in my dictum. Calcify is not. And then it gave me another pass and it spit out another word. Well, you should write it like this. And I'm like, no, I like the way I got it. Like, I'm writing it this way for a particular reason. It's like, oh, you're right. Because ChatGPT is like the child of an abusive household where it is desperate to try and make you happy. So you got to call it out. You got to make sure it's honest because it's really just trying to kiss your ass, which is a bummer. Like, who hurts you? But it is what it is. So I'm gonna pop in my story, and even saying that, like I hear the irony where it's like an abused child who just wants to make you happy, and I'm about to ask it, like, is my story going well? Of course, it's gonna blow smoke up my ass, but it'll give me something that's critical, something that at least sounds logical. So we'll see. So okay, what can I help you with? We're starting a new chat because the one I've been using has gotten way too slow. So what'll end up happening is you continue a chat for long enough and it kind of erodes the memory, and then the processing time takes longer because it's trying to go over everything in that chat in order to spit out a response. And if that doesn't work, it'll use whatever save data it has on you, because ChatGPT AI will save like its own little pockets of data. And the data that it saves for me is related to another book entirely that I have it hang on to because I'm going to be getting back to writing that book. So, what can I help with? And I got to type in everything that I've just said pretty much. I'm at a point with my current where I am getting discouraged and worried. Why am I doing double vowels today? Worried I have lost. Oh, I got fat fingers today. Worried I have lost the plot. And it is meandering without maintaining. I cannot type. It doesn't help that my computer no longer has an M key or an N key, and so I just have like the rubber base underneath it. Lost the plot and is meandering without maintaining. Rising tension. Like to paste all my chapters in so far. So you can let me know critically things are going. Start with the outline. And follow that with consecutive chapters. Do not need you to write for me. Just check for plot holes and arcs at this point. Okay. Yes, that's completely okay, and it's a very solid instinct to pause here rather than pushing forward while uncertain. A few important reassurances and ground rules so you know what to expect from me. What I can do, I can track plot coherence, identify where cause and effect weakens, where events don't clearly lead to consequences, or where threads are introduced but not developed. Evaluate narrative momentum, check whether tension is rising, plateauing, or dissipating, and why. Assess character arcs, whether characters are changing, resisting change, or circling the same emotional ground without escalating. Flag meandering, scenes that are thematically interesting but not currently pulling weight in the plot. Identify plot holes, logic gaps, including motivation gaps, timeline issues, or unclear stakes. What I will not do, as requested, I won't rewrite scenes. I won't fix the story for you. I won't impose a different story than the one you're telling. I won't dilute your philosophical or allegorical intent to chase commercial beats. Instead, I'll act like a clear-eyed developmental editor, critical, respectful, and precise. How we'll do this smoothly. Because you're past the idea phase and into structure, I'll read in layers. Outline first. I'll assess intended arcs, promises, and tension curves. Chapters sequentially. I'll track what each chapter adds, what it changes, what question it leaves unresolved. I'll periodically pause you briefly if a structural issue becomes obvious early or a pattern emerges that's better addressed before continuing. Sweet. I'll clearly separate observations, what's happening, concerns where it may falter, questions for you only when necessary, confidence checks when you're working and you may be underrating it. One thing I want you to know up front, feeling like you've lost a plot at this stage is often a sign that you're actually deep enough in the story to see its flaws. Not that the story is broken. Most meandering drafts feel philosophical and unfocused right before the spine becomes visible. So yes, go ahead. Paste the outline when you're ready, and after that we'll take the chapters one by one. So, word. And my stuff is all over the place. I really need to open up a new folder. Last modified Saturday at 3:30 a.m. Because I just such weird hours. Okay, so here's my outline so far. It is 5,521 words, 16 pages. Drowning, book 2 outline. I also got the little icons that show I pasted some of this from ChatGPT in order to help me write bits and pieces of the outline. I will write sloppy paragraphs like you're seeing me highlight right now, where I just jumble everything together and then pop it into a chat in order to have it organize it and try to establish a timeline. And then usually I have to sit and adjust that because it's not great. So pop the whole outline in, hit V, boom. Thank you for trusting me with this. I'm going to be very direct because you asked for a critical development read, not reassurance, and because your work deserves seriousness, I'll structure this in layers so it's usable rather than overwhelming. You have not lost the plot. What you're experiencing is not meandering, it's oversaturation of competence. The story is thematically coherent, the character arcs are unusually well defined, and the endgame is earned. The problem is not direction, it's tension management and distribution of uncertainty. Yeah, right now, too many characters are correct too early. Too many suspicions are validated too slowly. Arista's danger is conceptually strong but structurally undercut. The King's Gambit, while brilliant, retroactively drains suspense unless you rebalance who knows what when. None of this requires rewriting the story's premise or philosophy. It requires reweighting information and consequences. I'll explain. Big picture, does your story meander? No, but it feels like it does because the spine is delayed. The actual spine of the book is, can power choose restraint without becoming complicit? Everything aligns with that. The issue is that the reader doesn't feel the danger peak early enough, even though it exists. You have political suspicion, magical threat, romantic instability, a poisoning mystery, a potential tyrant queen. All good, but they introduce serially instead of compounding early. Results: the first 7 to 8 chapters read as setup, not escalation. 2. The single biggest structural issue. The King's secret undermines mid-book tension. The reveal that Gregarious knew, orchestrated the poisoning, and collaborated with Arista is thematically excellent, but structurally, it retroactively softens every prior accusation against Arista because the reader subconsciously realizes, oh, so this was never really dangerous. That's why you're feeling discouraged. Your instincts are right. This does not mean the twist is wrong. It means you need counterweight uncertainty. The 2 ways to fix this without rewriting: delay Arista's complicity. She can save him without knowing the full plan. Her selective restraint arc leads harder if she's acting partially blind. Make the King's gamble genuinely capable of killing him. Right now it's clever, it needs to be reckless. If the reader never fears Gregarious will die, the middle flattens. Arista, your greatest strength and biggest risk. Arista is fascinating, but she's too often right. Not morally, tactily. Where she works brilliantly. Her abrasiveness, her refusal to apologize, her precision instead of softness, her restraint being calculated, not ethical. Where tension leaks, her magic always escalates but rarely misfires. Her curses are framed as justified. Her power is feared but never truly out of her control. She is never wrong in outcome, only in optics. Then the court's fear becomes petty. Garrett's restraint loses friction. You don't need her to fail. You need one moment where restraint costs her something she wanted, not kindness, control. Garrett's arc is solid but backloaded. Garrett's arc is actually one of the cleanest I've seen in a draft outline. Problem: his decisive turns are clustered late. Chapter 6, defense, good. Chapter 14, dual restraint, excellent. Chapter 16, crown acceptance, earned. But from 7 to 13, he is reactive more than choosing. Suggestion: structural, not writing. Give Garrett one quiet refusal earlier that worsens things. He chooses not to dominate, and it costs him politically. That primes the duel to feel inevitable rather than corrective. The poison plot: logically sound, emotionally diffuse. The poisoning mystery works, but it's spread thin. You have Garth, Gregarious too, Galen's accidental implication, Pelavar's ignorance, arrogance, the witch, Pomeroy. Individually strong, collectively the reader is never unsure enough. Why? Because Arista is always the wrong suspect, and the text knows it. The court suspects her, but the narrative doesn't emotionally allow the reader to. Fix without adding plot. Let one accusation against Arista almost convince the reader, even briefly. Right now the story defends her too consistently. Belaine and Miri, excellent but under-weaponized. This is one of your strongest thematic pairings. However, Belaine's control fractures too late. Miri's agency is too clean. You should make Miri speaking up create collateral damage, even small, that makes her elevation earned rather than symbolic. Where the story actually risks meandering, not in events, in certainty. By chapter 10, we know Arista is not the villain. We know Garth is corrupt. We know the King is clever. We know Garrett is good. The question becomes when, not whether. And that's where tension bleeds. What you're feeling is normal and accurate. You're at the point where the characters are alive, the themes are dense, the outline is complex. This is exactly where authors feel like they've lost it. You haven't. You've reached the stage where the story needs sharper ignorance, fewer safety nets, and 1 or 2 real miscalculations. Next step, important. Before we move to chapters, I recommend one thing. Decide who is allowed to be wrong and about what. Not morally, strategically. If you want, next we can map knowledge versus ignorance by chapter, or start chapters 1 to 3 with a tension audit. or identify exactly where to move one reveal to regain momentum. You're not floundering, you're refining. Tell me how you'd like to proceed. Um, I'll be going straight into and keep what you said in mind. That's a good call, and a very writerly one. You're not stopping to overcorrect. You're letting the draft keep breathing while staying alert. It usually produces better work than pausing to fix things in abstraction. A few light guardrails to keep in the back of your mind as you add chapters. No action required, just orientation. Ask one quiet question per chapter. Who leaves the scene with less certainty than they entered it? If the answer is no one, that's often where tension thins. Let restraint hurt occasionally, especially for Arista. Not a moral loss, an instrumental one. Delay reassurance. Even when the reader knows the truth, make the story behave as if it might be wrong. You don't need to consciously apply all of this right now. Just let it hum in the background. When you're ready, page chapter 1. I'll read it strictly in the mode you asked for, tracking arcs, pressure, and logic. No rewriting, no steering. So I can lower that. That's fine. Chapter 1. This is 3,285 words, total of 9 pages. That's kind of right in the sweet spot. Between 3,000 and 4,000 is what I want per chapter. And I realized in chapter 2, as I was juggling so many characters, like they all demand their own time and space. And that's where I just get into bloat. And juggling so many characters is tough. And I worry about direction not being clear. Good, this is a strong opening chapter and it does real work. I'm going to stay in the lane you asked for, structural tension, arcs, logic, and where momentum leaks. I will not rewrite or stylistically nitpick unless it affects those things. I'll break this into clear sections so you can use it. First I'm going to grab some coffee. Hello, baby. Meow. Meow. Alright. Does chapter 1 meander? No. This chapter is doing exactly what a first chapter should do structurally. Sorry, working down a muffin. I made muffins yesterday. Introduces central relationship, Garrett and Arista, establishes political landscape, seeds multiple conflicts, ends with a destabilizing event, the king collapsing, introduces the book's governing metaphor, the rising tide. From a macro perspective, this chapter is efficient and purposeful. The feeling of density comes from how much competence and certainty is on display, not from wandering. What this chapter does especially well, Arista's position is immediately clear. She is powerful, socially dangerous, not interested in playing the court's games, operates on ownership and transaction rather than decorum. Crucially, she is not softened for reader comfort, which is rare and good. Her demand for immediate marriage is not impulsive, it is consistent with her worldview. That matters. The court's reaction is credible. You've done something smart here. Fear, servants, lust, Garth, jealousy, wives, amusement, royal couple, calculation, advisor. No one reacts out of character, and the court does not speak with one voice. That prevents flattening. The king's collapse is well placed. Ending the chapter with the king slumping does three things: interrupts sexual tension, good restraint, converts social conflict into existential stakes, retroactively charges Arista's rising tide warning. This is a strong hook. The first structural leak: too much safety too early. This is important. The king and queen are too amused. They laugh at Arista's violence, dismiss Isolde's concerns, frame Arista as youthful fire rather than threat. Result: the reader subconsciously relaxes. Even though danger is said, it is not felt at the top of the power structure. You do not need to make them hostile, but one of them, likely the queen, should show quiet calculation instead of shared amusement. Right now, the royal couple function as "this is fine, actually," which slightly undercuts the tension Arista should be causing. Garth. Effective antagonist, slightly too on the nose. Mojo! Okay, you're fine. You're in your dig box. You're just annoying. Garth works. He is predatory, entitled, politically aware, immediately jealous of wealth. However, his lust and greed and dismissal all appear in rapid succession. He is clearly marked as bad very early. This isn't wrong, but it means he stops being uncertain almost immediately. Suggestion: structural only. Let him perform one superficially reasonable action before revealing the hunger underneath. That keeps the reader uncertain longer. Right now, he's flagged villain in chapter 1. Sorry, my bunny's being a shithead. Oh, it's both of you. That's my cat and my bunny. Mojo. Yeah, it's gonna have a reward you for being annoying. I'm gonna take that. Mischief, be nicer. Okay. Arista's threat, thematic gold, structural risk. A king that steals from the sea will be consumed by a rising tide. This line is excellent thematically, but structurally it is too clearly prophetic. It is immediately validated by the king's collapse. That makes Arista's seem already vindicated, which is dangerous for tension. If the story later needs the court to doubt or oppose her, you'll need either ambiguity or whether she caused it, or ambiguity about whether it's coincidence. The cat's being crazy. Or ambiguity about whether it's coincidence. Right now, the sequence implies causality, even if unintentionally. 6. Knowledge distribution issue early. Already by the end of chapter 1, the reader knows Arista is not malicious, Garrett is sincere, the king is fragile, Garth is dangerous, the queen is indulgent but sharp. That's a lot of certainty very fast. This is the same issue we discussed earlier, showing up immediately. You don't need to remove information, but you may want to delay emotional validation. For example, let Arista misread one social cue. Let Garrett's confidence cost him something small. Let the king's collapse be plausibly exhaustion, not omen. The bedroom scene, what it does and what it risks. The scene is doing narrative work, not just intimacy. Hi, Lou. Do you need to bother me now, too? What's up? Hi. Hi. You finished your food from yesterday, and now you think you deserve a treat for it? Is that the vibe that I'm getting right now? Because you're licking your lips and trying to lead me back. Let me get through this critique. Okay? I don't even want me to pitch. Fine. Fine. hard to get stuff done. The bedroom scene, what it does and what it risks. The scene is doing narrative work, not just intimacy. It establishes Arissa's physical dominance, Garrett's divided loyalties, desire versus responsibility, the servants as witnesses, rumor vectors, sexuality as destabilizing, not romantic. That's all good. The risk, the servants' voyeurism, Garrett's command, and furniture shifting ends the chapter on triumph, not unease. But your final line wants unease. Right now, the emotional note slightly conflicts with the thematic note. You want the intimacy to feel satisfying, but complicating, not cleansing. Is there a plot hole here? No outright plot holes. However, 2 pressure points to watch. Why the court allows Arista to leave so early, given the threat, plus wealth, restraint needs justification later. Why no one immediately blames Arista for the collapse. You may want suspicion to start forming now, even if it's quiet. Overall verdict on Chapter 1. This is a strong, confident opening chapter. You have no lost control of the narrative. Your issue is not meandering, it's early stabilization. Too many things feel earned, understood, safe in their trajectories. That's why your instinct says, I'm worried. You're sensing that the story might become inevitable rather than dangerous. What I'll watch for in Chapter 2. When you paste it, I'll be specifically looking for who misinterprets the king's collapse, whether Arista pays a cost for her bluntness, whether Garrett is forced into a choice rather than consensus. Go ahead and paste Chapter 2 when ready. So Chapter 2 ballooned up and is most likely going to get cut into 4 separate chapters. I will paste them in in sections since it is so long. It's completely fine. Honestly, it's a useful signal rather than a problem. When a second chapter balloons like that, it usually means one of 2 things, sometimes both. You're transitioning from premise to machinery. The world, politics, and consequences are starting to move. Multiple tension vectors are being introduced yet without colliding, which is exactly the point where writers start to worry about losing the plot. So splitting it is the right instinct, and pasting in sections is ideal for the kind of analysis you want. I'll handle the sections. I'll read each section as a candidate chapter unit, asking what changes because of this section, who gains or loses leverage, what new uncertainty is created. I'll flag natural breaking points where a chapter should end, redundant beats that can compress, places where tension plateau instead of escalate. I'll also keep an eye on thorough line integrity so you don't lose the arc while zooming in. One small request before you paste. At the top of each section, just label it with something like Chapter 2, Section A, Chapter 2, Section B, etc. No need to polish or explanation. When you're ready, paste Section A. Alright, try to keep that in mind. And this one took forever to get through. I was really concerned about that because it did slog. That's a word that's found its way into my vocabulary since I started writing again. Slogging. When things just slog to get done. That's the outline, chapter. Alright. Boom. Put that over here. That's where it naturally wants to end. Thank you. This is very readable, very alive, and also a good example of why you're feeling uneasy. This section is doing a lot of social work, but almost no plot work. That's not a failure, but it is where momentum quietly leaks. I'll stay disciplined and focused on structure, tension, arcs, and logic, not prose. What this section is doing accurately, this section functions as a pressure chamber, not a plot engine. It establishes the family ecosystem, sexual jealousy triangles, Arista, Jocelyn, Garrett. Garth's political hunger, Garrett's emotional allegiance, Corbin, blood. Arista's intolerance for courtly triviality, who has soft power versus brute presence. That's all legitimate setup, but here's the key point. Nothing actually changes by the end of this section. No decision is made, no secret is revealed, no consequent lands. Okay. The tension rises socially, then vents when Lady Isolde interrupts. That's the core issue. Why this feels like meandering, even though it's not bad. You're stacking horizontal tension. Banter, jealousy, microaggression instead of vertical tension, choice, and consequence. Every interaction escalates emotionally, but Garrett does not choose. Arista does not overstep irreversibly. Garth is not checked publicly. Jocelyn is not humiliated or empowered in a lasting way. So the scene keeps circling its conflicts rather than advancing them. This is why it ballooned. Social stasis invites elaboration. Character arcs strong but temporarily frozen. Garrett, he is confident, controlled, well-liked, never wrong-footed. Structural concern. Garrett loses nothing here. He parries Garth, charms Corbin, manages Arista, and exits clean. That makes him static in this section. Long term, that's dangerous because a protagonist who always de-escalates early scenes delays their arc. You want him to fail at mediation soon, even slightly. Arista is excellent here, but note something important. She is reactive, not proactive. Her tension points, court banter irritates her, Jocelyn provokes her, Garrett steadies her. She never chooses escalation. She is restrained by Garrett and by interruption. That keeps her power latent instead of costly. You may want one moment where she refuses to soften and the social cost actually lands. Otherwise, she risks becoming contained fire for too long. Garth is doing exactly one thing repeatedly, signaling entitlement to the crown. He does it well, but there's no variation. Structural risk. He's reinforcing what we already know from Chapter 1 without changing the board. One concrete move, a veiled threat, a claim, a private word overheard, would convert him from color to engine. Jocelyn. Jocelyn is the most structurally interesting here. She mourned Garrett, is emotionally invested, is constrained by Galen, uses soft cruelty, status questioning. This section almost pivots around her, but she never wins or loses decisively. That's a missed opportunity. The Corbin moment, warm but momentum killing. Corbin's entrance is emotionally satisfying, and that's the problem. It relieves tension, confirms Garrett's goodness, aligns Arista and Garrett emotionally, shifts focus away from Garth and Jocelyn conflict. Placed here, it functions as a pressure release valve right where the scene needs to tighten. This moment would be structurally stronger if it cost Garrett politically or humiliated Garth. I kind of feel like it does, but okay. Or violated protocol visibly. As written is pure affirmation. The ending beat interrupted, not resolved. Lady Isolde's interruption is clean and believable, but interruption cuts escalation because no one is forced to commit. No misunderstanding calcifies. There's that word. No social damage becomes permanent. You exit the section roughly where you entered, just with more texture. That's why this feels like it could be 4 chapters. It's expandable because nothing snaps shut. Is this a plot hole? No plot holes. But there is a structural imbalance. Too many characters are introduced before the story demands them to act. You're front-loading relational nuance before stakes force compression. That's not wrong, but it delays inevitability. Natural breakpoints, very important. This section should not be a full chapter by itself. It works best as first half of a chapter, immediately followed by new information about the king, a political announcement, a forced seating arrangement. Okay. A public misstep. Without the follow-through, it floats. The core pattern emerging, this is a big one. Across Chapter 1 and now 2A, the pattern is forming. Social tension rises, Garrett smooths it, authority figures interrupt, no one pays a price yet. That pattern is sustainable for 1 chapter. If it continues, the book will feel polite rather than dangerous. Your instinct that tension isn't rising is correct, but the cause is precise. Consequences are being deferred to consistently. What I'll be watching for in section 2b, when you paste the next section, I'll be looking for a moment someone miscalculates, a social cost that cannot be undone, a shift in power that persists past the scene. If 2b continues social positioning without consequence, that's where we'll need to talk about restructuring rather than trimming. Go ahead and paste 2b when ready. I'm not sure where this one ends exactly. Alright, this section is important, and it's also where your instinct that the story is losing upward tension becomes structurally accurate rather than emotional. I'm going to be very clear because this is the hinge where your book either tightens or diffuses. Again, no rewriting, no stylistic policing. This is about what this section does to the plot engine. I'm going to refill my cup. Mojo, what are you doing? Alright, this section is important, and it's also where your instinct what 2B is actually doing, this is not a dinner scene, this is a ritual inversion scene. Functionally, it publicly reframes Arista from dangerous outsider to romantic marvel, establishes Garrett as a cultural translator and a myth maker. Is that better? Tell me that's better. Rat. Alright. And I'm not even looking at Twitch, which poor Twitchers get angry if they don't get attention. Sweet, no one's commenting, maybe not even watching. Alright. Publicly reframes Arista from dangerous outsider to romantic marvel, establishes Garrett as a cultural translator and myth maker, demonstrates how quickly court opinion can be reshaped, introduces religious surveillance with Sister Kayleen, reinforces the sea salt consumption motive. On a thematic level, this is very strong. On a structural level, this is catastrophically relieving tension. The core problem, Arista wins too completely, too publicly. By the end of this section, the king adores her, the queen is amused and intrigued, the noble women romanticize her, court behavior shifts to imitate her, Garrett's narrative collapse controls the room, the curse is reframed as tragic destiny, her transgressions are reclassified as charm. This is not escalation, this is social conquest. Nothing remains unresolved except Garth's quiet resentment, Sister Kayleen's private scrutiny. Those are future threats, but in the present scene, Arista dominates utterly. That's why the section feels long. Dominance scenes expand. Conflict scenes compress. The dinner as a structural dead end. As the structural question, what is worse for the protagonist at the end of this dinner than at the beginning? The answer is nothing. In fact, everything is better. Arista gains legitimacy. Garrett gains mythic authority. The court bends. Suspicion turns to fascination. That's why the scene does not push the plot. It resolves it prematurely. This is material you would normally expect after a public scandal, a failed negotiation, a political misstep, or a moral compromise. Instead, it's happening immediately. Sister Kayleen, your only active pressure, and she's too quiet. Sister Kayleen is the only figure here applying real narrative pressure. She reads Arista accurately, clocks the darkness, registers the Rephaim reveal, watches while others indulge, but structurally she never interrupts, she never questions publicly, she never forces a response. So she becomes a delayed threat, not a present one. That's fine, but it means the entire scene operates without opposition. Garrett's arc stalls here. This is important. Garrett does something subtle but dangerous to your tension curve. He speaks for Arista, controls the narrative, softens truths, reframes violence as romance, answers questions for her repeatedly. This makes him effective, admirable, in control, but it also means he never risks being wrong. He doesn't misjudge the room, he doesn't overplay his hand, he doesn't pay a cost for lying, embellishing, or protecting. That freezes his arc. If Garrett can always talk the world into alignment, the plot has no teeth. The Queen, amusement without counterweight. Queen Gwendolyn is sharp, but here she is indulgent. She teases, probes lightly, accepts partial answers, enjoys the spectacle. At no point does she demand clarification, reassert authority, force Arista to speak for herself. This turns her into an audience member rather than a power node. That's fine once, but repeated indulgence will hollow her threat. The food motive, thematic success, structural overuse. The salt sea consumption motive is doing real symbolic work. Ocean versus land, appetite versus decorum, natural abundance versus court refinement. But structurally, it's indulged too long without consequence. And one of my viewers pointed this out to me too while I was writing it, that it's too good. There needs to be consequence. But it's so thick, I can't really get to it all. But structurally, it's indulged too long without consequence. Every escalation, salt, fingers, feeding, imitation, is entertaining, affirming, and contagious. No one recoils in a way that sticks. Chef Pomeroy's distress is comic, not consequential. This turns the motive from disruptive into celebratory. The Rephaim reveal happens too safely. This is critical. The reveal that Arista's brother betrayed her, dark elves were involved, she was cursed, should be a fault line. Instead, it becomes a toast. It is absorbed into romance. It produces no immediate suspicion or fracture. You have burned a major revelation without friction. That's a pacing problem, not a content problem. Pattern confirmed. Conflict is being absorbed, not stored. Across 2A and 2B, a clear pattern has emerged now. Social tension arises. Arista disrupts norms. Garrett reframes. Authority indulges. Crowd follows. Threats retreat into the future. This pattern is repeatable, which is the danger. Once a reader sees the pattern, tension collapses because outcomes become predictable. Where the section should sit structurally, this material is not wrong, but structurally it belongs later, after something goes badly wrong. As it stands, it functions like a victory lap, a coronation rehearsal, a honeymoon montage. Placed here, it undermines your rising action, why you're feeling lost. You haven't lost a plot, you've won too early. Your instincts are catching that the story is becoming inevitable rather than precarious, and that's not about prose, themes, or ideas, it's when victories occur. What are we watching for in 2C? If you paste the next section, I need to see one of the following happen immediately. A public consequence that cannot be smoothed over, a private threat made explicit, a misinterpretation that will cost someone later, authority reasserting itself sharply, or Arista being forced to speak and misstepping. If 2C continues indulgence or containment, then yes, we'll need to talk about structural surgery, not trimming. Go ahead and paste 2C when you're ready. This whole thing is 11,000 words. So that's about a quarter of what my first book was. Can I get all of it? That's 7,000. Okay. Thank you for trusting me with this much material. I'm going to be very direct because at this point you are no longer meandering. You are standing at a structural turning point, and the book finally acquires teeth here. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It bloated. It ballooned up. The issue is not that nothing happens, it's that too much decisive material happens at once and it destabilizes your tension curve rather than cleanly inverting it. I'll break this into clear sections so you can see exactly where things work, where they overload, and where the plot actually turns. First, your instinct was right, and then you fixed it. Let's be clear. 2C is the first place where irreversible consequence occurs. By the end of this section, Garth is publicly stuck and humiliated. Court decorum collapses visibly. Arista is refrained from fascinating outsider to existential threat. The king collapses, even if temporarily explained away. Arista openly declares queenship. Garrett is forcibly separated from her by religious authority. Suspicion crystallizes and does not dissipate. Garrett's self-concept fractures. This is no longer indulgent social theater. This is a point of no return. So no, you have not lost the plot. You have hit your inciting rupture. The structural problem is compression, not direction. The danger is now over-compression. You have packed what are functionally 4 major plot beats into one continuous sequence. The enchantment scandal, the sexual assault, retaliation, public humiliation, Arista's ideological manifesto, queenship claim, the king's collapse, political panic, Garrett's private ideological seduction and transformation. Each of these could anchor a chapter. Together they create intensity, but they also flatten escalation because there's no recovery time between blows. This is why the section feels breathless and overwhelming rather than cleanly rising. The song scene. This is where the axis tilts correctly. The singing is no longer indulgent, it becomes dangerous. What works? The magic now has visible moral consequences. Desire curdles into shame. Different reactions, lust, sleep, revulsion, stratify characters. Sister Kayleen's judgment is earned, not delayed. This is the exact moment where earlier indulgence is retroactively justified. However, you let the song go on just slightly too long after its danger is clear. Once people rise, hands itch, Garth is visibly fighting himself. The scene wants interruption fast. The longer it continues, the less shocking the later slap feels because the room has already crossed into chaos. This is a trimming note, not a rewrite note. The slap is perfect, structurally and morally. The slap is the first clean, unavoidable consequence in the book. Why it works. It is reactive, not premeditated. It is witnessed. It inverts physical power expectations. It exposes Garth's cowardice. It forces Garrett to choose sides physically. Most importantly, Arista stops being symbolic here and becomes political. There is no version of this court that can now absorb her. This is excellent. Arista's speech. Thematic bullseye, structural overextension. This is where I need to be blunt. The speech is thematically razor sharp. It is also too complete for this moment. She diagnoses the entire court correctly, names male entitlement, names female coping strategies, names performative civility, names power as appetite, names the structural reproduction of tyranny, declares queenship. This is endgame rhetoric. Structurally, it creates 2 problems. It leaves no ambiguity. The court has nowhere left to misunderstand her. Future conflict risks repetition rather than discovery. It accelerates Arista to ideological apex before Garrett catches up, which forces his arc to sprint unnaturally fast in response. You don't need to cut this speech, you likely need to fracture it. Some of this belongs later, once she has actual leverage. The king's collapse, effective but overlapping. The king's collapse is a strong escalation on its own, placed immediately after a queenship declaration, sexual assault confrontation, and public ideological indictment. It risks reading as pile-on rather than inevitability. The danger isn't logic, it's signal clarity. Right now, the reader is asked to process moral panic, political panic, religious panic, and familial panic all at once. One of these should breathe. Garrett's arc finally breaks. This is the real plot turn. This is the most important thing that you've written so far. Garrett realizes Arista is not a threat to the court, she is a threat to him. This is excellent. This is necessary. This is the real inciting transformation. But, and this is crucial, the sexual consummation happens too quickly after the ideological rupture. Not morally, structurally. Because he has not yet acted on his fear in the public world. He has not yet failed anyone except himself. His choice to dominate reads as immediate acceptance rather than dangerous temptation. This blunts tension going forward. The pattern is finally broken, but it breaks too hard. Earlier I warned about a pattern, tension, indulgence, absorption, release. That pattern is now shattered. However, it is replaced by revelation, escalation, 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 consummation, which risks exhausting your second act too early. So where are you structurally? You are not lost. You are at the end of Act 1, beginning of Act 2. The world has rejected the status quo. The protagonist's self-image is cracked. The antagonist, Garth, and system is exposed but not defeated. The love interest is now an ideological force, not a prize. That is exactly where you should be. What needs adjustment, not rewriting. Here are surgical, structural notes only. Split this material across chapters. Song and slap, one chapter. Speech and king, collapse, another. Corridor confrontation, another. Consummation, its own quiet, dangerous chapter. Withhold part of Arista's ideological clarity. Let the court misunderstand her once. Save some of the diagnosis for later conflict. Delay Garrett's full sexual authority acceptance. Let him choose wrongly first. Let him try restraint and fail publicly. Let consequence echo before escalating again. Let the court should talk about this. Rumors should mutate. Sister Kayleen should act. Final answer to your original fear. You asked whether you'd lost the plot. The answer is no. What happened instead is more dangerous. You found the true plot earlier than you expected. Now the work is not inventing tension, it's spacing it so it can breathe, mutate, and hurt. If you want next, we can map arcs clearly across 2 and 3. Identify who your true antagonist is. It's not just Garth. Or do a chapter by chapter tension graph so you can see where to cut and where to let scenes stand. You're not flailing, you've struck the nerve. Got it. I read 2C, 2D in full, and I'm holding my analysis rather than unloading it now, since you're still feeding material and tracking character arcs, especially Garrett's internal hinge, escalation versus saturation, where tension advances versus where it spins, and where natural chapter breaks actually want to be. You're doing the right thing by not interrupting the flow yet. Go ahead and face chapter 3 when ready. After that, I recommend we pause and do a structural diagnostic pass of chapters 1 through 3 together. Not line edits, not rewrites, just pressure, causality, and arc integrity. This is 2,678 words, which is pretty perfect. Except that's not the whole thing. So sometimes I run into these issues where it won't let me save it under the same name. And I hate it because it gets so sloppy. Yeah, 3.1. $4,641. Yep, that's more like it. Which means this is a little long. But it's all these characters speaking, it's all these character interactions. I might be going for like really short chapters. I might be going like 2,000 words a chapter. Control C. Thank you for trusting me with this much of the book. I'm going to do exactly what you asked. No rewriting, no stylistic steering, just a clear-eyed structure and arc diagnosis across 2A, 2B, and 3, focused on tension, causality, and whether you've lost the plot or merely entered a denser phase. I'll break this into 5 lenses so you can see precisely where things are working and where the anxiety you're feeling is coming from. First, you have not lost the plot. What you have done is shift from external survival plot to internal political pressure plot, and that shift is what feels like meandering. Up to this point, the story's engine is no longer, will Garrett survive, return, win Arista? It is now, can Arista exist inside civilization without destabilizing it? Can Garrett protect her without lying or betraying himself? Who will define what corruption means first, faith, science, or power? That's a legitimate escalation, not a loss of direction. The danger is density, not aimlessness. Structural diagnosis, where chapters actually want to break. Your instinct that chapter 2 ballooned is absolutely correct. What you currently call 2A, 2B, early 3 is actually 4 structural units. Natural chapter units, not rewrite instructions, just diagnosis. Return and social reentry, 2A. Balcony introductions, Garth tension, Jocelyn rivalry, Corbin as moral anchor. Core tension, Garrett returning to hierarchy, he escaped. The feast is cultural collision. 2B, first half, Arista versus etiquette, salt, seafood, body, autonomy, queen observing rather than judging. Core tension, Arista cannot perform civilized femininity and won't try. The feast turns mythic. 2B, second half, true love breaks curse, social narrative flips, Arista becomes story instead of scandal. Core tension, the court mythologizes what it can't control. The morning after, accusation, chapter 3, king's illness, science versus faith. Arista examined, core tension, Arista becomes the suspected cause of decay. Seen this way, nothing is wandering, you're stacking pressure from different systems. The real issue, escalation, is lateral, not vertical, yet. Here's the key thing you're feeling. The tension rises, but doesn't yet irreversibly cost anyone anything. What does escalate? Suspicion, social friction, myth-making, ideological conflict. What has not yet happened. No character has made a choice that closes off an option. No alliance is broken. No secret is truly exposed. No protection is withdrawn. So the story feels busy, rich, alive, but not dangerous yet. That's not a flaw at this stage, but you're approaching the point where you need a point of no return. Character arc check. This is where you're actually doing very well. Garrett. Arc is coherent and tightening. He is honest to a fault. He cannot lie to protect Arista. He keeps trying to mediate systems instead of choosing one. Emerging flaw. Garrett assumes good faith from institutions that do not operate on love. This is a strong setup flaw, not a mistake. Arista. Arista is not chaotic. She is pre-civilizational. What works extremely well? Her appetite, her physicality, her refusal to be embarrassed, her instinctive dominance. What's important, she is not stupid. She learns. Fork scene is excellent. She chooses truth, not manipulation. Hidden tension, she is adapting faster than anyone realizes, and that will frighten people later. Sister Kayleen, this is one of your strongest pieces of writing. She is not evil, not hysterical, not wrong, but structurally dangerous. Her fear is sincere, and that makes her terrifying. Queen Gwendolyn, she is the stabilizer. She understands power, narrative, and optics. She is buying time, not resolving danger. That's excellent. Plot holes versus plot risks. I see no true plot holes. I do see 3 structural risks to watch. Risk 1, feast scene length versus payoff. The feast is thematically rich, but it is long. Its payoff is mythologizing Arista, setting up Kaylin's suspicion. That works, but when revising later, this is where you'll compress, not cut. Too many observers, not enough consequences yet. Many characters notice things. Belaine, Gregarious, Jocelyn, Kayleen, Queen, Paraval. Soon one of them must act in a way that can't be undone. Risk 3, the king's illness must escalate decisively. Right now it is intriguing, symbolic, suspicious, but soon it must become either politically urgent or personally devastating. Otherwise it risks becoming background dread instead of narrative force. Bottom line, important, you are not meandering, you are in the pressure cooker phase where systems clash, identities harden, and the story is deciding what kind of tragedy or transformation it wants to be. What you are missing is the first irreversible move, and that's normal at exactly this point in a novel. If you want, next we can identify which character is best positioned to make that irreversible move, or map where the true midpoint turn likely lives, but for now, you're still holding the plot, it hasn't slipped out of your hands. Next is 3.5. I already had to split chapter 3 from the outline. Perfect. Before I dive in, just to clarify, do you want me to continue the same structural arc focus that we did as we go into 3.5? Or do you want me to line by line read causality this time? Same. And it's asking me that because I've already used up all the like free the chat, all the free chat version 5 options it's given me already. So now I'm gonna get the slightly dumber version of ChatGPT in order to help me with this. Which a lot of the time, if I'm using it to help me with like writing and doing grammar checks and stuff like that, I will stop once I get the dumb version of it. And here I got 3.5, 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4, so I got to go with the latest iteration, the 0.4. This is another long chapter. Thanks for sharing 3.5. This is a long, intricate chapter with heavy emotional tension, world building, and character development. Here's a detailed breakdown with observations, strengths, and areas you might refine. And you see, like, the way it's presenting information has already changed with the bullet points. Strengths. The chapter balances intense emotional beats, Arista and Garrett's private argument, the aquarium scene with slower expository passage, Miri's storytelling about the castle and the other characters. The storm motive outside mirrors the inner storm between Garrett and Arista, which helps maintain a strong narrative rhythm. Transitions from conflict, humor, tension, exposition, resolutions are clear and fluid, keeping the reader engaged. Potential issues. Miri's long monologues, while rich in detail, slow the chapter considerably. They occasionally feel like info dumps, especially as she jumps between palace politics, servants' gossip, and historical context. Consider breaking them into shorter sections or interspersing them with interaction beats from Arista and Garrett to maintain tension. The chapter is very long and dense. Readers could feel overwhelmed by the sheer volume of dialogue and exposition. Some trimming or splitting might help clarity. Characterization. Garrett. His protective instincts and internal conflict over secrecy are clear. His bucket prince moment adds humor, showing his earnest but sometimes fumbling nature. Might consider giving him a slightly more agency in the Miri scenes. He largely observes while Arista and Miri dominate the conversation. Arista, strong, vivid characterization, temperamental, powerful, passionate, yet capable of calm authority. The interplay between her sea witch nature and the human form is compelling, especially in her interactions with Miri. Consider trimming some repetitive expressions of fury, still naked and still defiant. Once or twice is enough to convey the intensity. Miri functions as both a comic relief and expositional tool. Her nervous energy and dual loyalty to Belaine and Garrett and Arista are believable. Some of her exposition could be condensed. For example, all the little political details about the king, Dunrick, and the guards could be summarized more tightly. Dialogue. Strength. Naturalistic and distinct for each character. Arista's sharp, authoritative voice contrasts nicely with Miri's nervous babbling and Garrett's hesitant calm. Humor is well placed. Example given, the ladle exchange, bucket prints, providing relief in tense scenes. Areas to polish. Some exchanges are very long without interruption. Example given, Miri's explanations, breaking up her speech with interjections, reactions, or brief physical actions can keep the energy dynamic. Occasionally, dialogue veers into exposition-heavy territory. Example given, detailed palace politics. It could be trimmed or transformed into showing instead of telling. Tension and conflict. The chapter excels at building tension in multiple layers. Personal stakes. Arista's frustration with Garrett at the secrecy around her identity. Physical stakes, the storm outside paralleling the emotional tempest. 3. Social stakes, fear of Miri overhearing and reporting to Belaine. The storm and naked confrontation sequence is particularly effective in showing Arista's power and Garrett's vulnerability. Consider adding a bit more internal thought or anxiety for Garrett during the long expository scenes to maintain reader tension while Miri talks. World building, exposition, strengths. You convey castle hierarchy, politics, and interpersonal dynamics organically through Miri's eyes. Arista's magical abilities are shown in subtle ways, changing appearance, controlling presence, keeping magic integrated rather than explained via info dump. Potential refinements, some historical contextual info about other characters. Parable, Sathriel, Valus, Jocelyn can be summarized more effectively. A few lines could replace several paragraphs without losing the depth of the world. Repeated mentions of servants' roles, gossip, and palace politics, while colorful, sometimes blur the focus on the primary emotional arc, Garrett and Arista. Emotional beats and themes. Themes of secrecy, power, identity, and dynamics of friendship and loyalty are strong. Arista's moral reflections on friendship versus social contracts are excellent. They add philosophical depth without stopping the narrative. The chapter successfully transitions from tension, humor, exposition, resolution, action, preparing to go visit the king. Suggestions for tightening. Break Miri's monologues, interleave them. What the fuck does interleave mean? Interleave them with Garrett and Arista's, I think, interweave? That's how I would say that. Interweave them with Garrett and Arista's reactions, gestures, or internal thoughts. Trim redundancy in Arista's expressions of anger. A few well-placed beats convey fury as effectively as repeated lines. Summarize palace politics. Combine details about guards, other nobles, and servants into concise paragraphs. Optional split. Consider splitting the chapters into 3.5 and 3.6. 3.5 Storm Confrontation, Garrett Arista discussion, Bucket Prince humor. 3.6 Miri's observations, Arista's dressing, philosophical dialogue, calm before visiting the king. So yeah, I'm probably going to end up doing shorter chapters than what I had originally planned and far more chapters than I had initially intended. But that's fine. Shorter chapters are good because you want to be able to create chapters where if somebody is like, they're reading like, oh, I should really go to bed, or oh, I should really do something else, and I just like flip through and like, oh, the next chapter's not that long, they're more likely to read it. And you want that. You want to get people hooked in and going. Whereas a long chapter, like, oh, this is really long, I should take a break. You want something that people are just going to snack on. Overall impression, very strong chapter, great characterization, tension, and humor. Minor pacing adjustments would prevent reader fatigue due to the length and density of Miri's exposition. The chapter solidly develops the relationships, the stakes, and the world simultaneously. If you want, I can draft suggested trimmed versions of this chapter that keeps all key emotional beats, humor, and world building, but removes some of the repetitiveness and info dumps, which makes it flow more smoothly for readers. Do you want me to do that? No. Next, I have an emergent chapter. I didn't outline initially, but it demanded to be written. I call it call it 3_4 for now. Oh, pardon me. Okay. This is 3,129 words. This chapter has a lot of strength. It's rich in character dynamics, ceremonial detail, and world building. There's also a nice tension between formality and intimacy, plus a touch of humor and nostalgia in the king's storytelling. That said, it's dense and a few areas can be tightened or clarified to maintain flow and maximize impact. Here's a structured critique with suggestions. Strengths, character, voice, and relationships. Arista's presence is commanding without being overbearing. You make her impact clear through others' reactions, which is excellent. Garrett's mixture of familial respect, relief, and subtle deference feels authentic. Dunrick's personality shines through dialogue, gruff, loyal, and humorous. The king's voice is warm, nostalgic, and clearly seasoned with wisdom and whimsy. His storytelling is engaging and gives a sense of lived history. World building. The pilgrimage and Alo are intriguing, and the flashback gives us a sense of scope and danger of your world. Small details like the moving forest, Atlantis, dragons expand the magical geography without info dumping, castle dynamics, guards, servants, heirs, all are well handled and make the social hierarchy feel lived in. I'm gonna grab more coffee real quick and keep my foot from falling asleep. It's too late. Oh, it's too late. I'm limping. Bro. Be my guy, bunny. Oh, help me not alone. All right, more coffee. Um, Emotional resonance. Arista calming tensions with Belaine and Isolde is satisfying. It shows her influence and strategic awareness. The interplay between the king's frailty and his lively storytelling creates poignancy. The brief moments of humor, Dunrick's grumbles, Garrett's foot hits the cask, lighten the tension appropriately. Opportunities for improvement. The king's story is compelling but extremely long. Consider breaking it into multiple segments or interspersing with reactions from Arista, Garrett, and the court to prevent reader fatigue. Some paragraphs describing travel and battles could be condensed. For example, the description of the dragon fight could focus on one or two vivid details rather than enumerating all hazards. Dialogue clarity. Some lines are long and might benefit from splitting. For instance, traipsing through swamps so thick and mired I had to carry Dunrick on my shoulders while keeping my mouth shut to keep the mud out of my mouth. Once we encountered a trio of hags could be split into two sentences. Traipsing through the swamp so thick I had to carry Dunrick on my shoulders. All the while, I had to keep my mouth shut to keep the mud out. Once we encountered a trio of hags. Repetition. Certain phrases repeat. He said, he smiled, he laughed multiple times in quick succession, alternating with physical gestures, reactions from others, or leaving attribution implied could make the storytelling smoother. Yeah, repetition is always an issue. Character reactions. The reactions of secondary characters, Isolde, Gwendolyn, Belaine, could sometimes be expanded into small beats to break up long monologues from the king and keep the scene dynamic. For example, when the king mentions the pilgrimage, brief interjections like Arista leaned forward, intrigued, or Gwendolyn's hand rested lightly on his arm, would puncture the speech and visually remind the reader of others' presence. Show versus tell. The king describes many events. Consider showing a few key moments with short, immersive beats rather than summarizing everything. For instance, the dragon encounter could be a brief cinematic flash instead of a full list of attacks and companions' actions. Minor typo, word choice, traipsing, tramping. Old Dunrick was hit by the thing and went flying. Could be slightly more formal to match the elevated tone of the storytelling, or left informal for humor contrast. Suggestions for flow and tightening. Break the pilgrimage tale into sections. Early journey plus companions, challenges and monsters, meeting Alo transformation, meeting Gwendolyn, the dragon incident. Interleave reactions. Sprinkle short gestures, facial expressions, and physical beats between longer stretches of the king's dialogue to keep readers anchored. Trim minor exposition or merge sentences to maintain narrative momentum, especially in long lists of companions and obstacles. Polish transitions between humorous moments, Dunrick, young gregarious, and the king's story to make the emotional shifts feel smoother. Overall impression, this emergent chapter does exactly what a 3-4 should. It deepens the world, strengthens relationships, and allows Rissa and Garrett to shine while giving weight to the king's history. The biggest refinement opportunity is pacing and readability. The scene is rich but dense, and slight trimming, interspersed reactions, and careful sentence splitting would make it feel immersive without overwhelming the reader. If you want, I can rewrite a polished, tightened version of this chapter that keeps all the charm and detail, but makes it flow faster and feel more cinematic, breaking up the king's story, keeping the character beats, and maintaining humor. That would be a next level edit. Do you want me to do that? No. When I do have it go through and do edits like that, what I'll have it do is take it section by section and then show my section, show what I wrote, and then show how it would change it, and then explain to me why. it believes those changes are necessary. So I can go through and I can evaluate it bit by bit, because like pacing will get taken off a little bit, and sometimes I like the pacing that it suggests because it'll make something sound more poetic and stagger things a little bit. It definitely helps me with paragraph breaks because I write a lot of run-on sentences. I write a lot of just fat, overly full paragraphs that definitely need to have breaks in order for people to know when to breathe. And then it's very common for me to write a sentence that is doing way too many things at one time. So having something come along and say, you know, a comma here, or this could be two sentences or something like that, it speeds up the edit process so much because I can't afford an editor. An editor at minimum will cost you about $1,000. Typically they charge, I think it's like a penny a word. So when you create a longer work, especially when you have emergent chapters and character bloat and stuff like that, that cost adds up really, really fast. So next I just have the bare bones outline for what was originally going to be chapter 4. I still call it that at this point. I still have to finish the outline and hopefully write the draft today. Perfect. Let's flesh out your outline so it's a strong scaffold for the chapter. Share what you currently have for chapter 4, and we can fill in the gaps with character actions, dialogue beats, and emotional arcs. Add necessary world building or plot elements. Map the pacing. Right now I'm just looking for a critique of the work as a whole at this point. Like I said, making sure I haven't lost plot, woke up with a fair amount of self-doubt. I'm at the point where I quit a lot of past projects. Using this chat at the moment to stay on track and keep moving forward. Absolutely, I can give you a thorough constructive critique of what you have so far. Where it seems to be focus on structure, pacing, character arcs, and overall cohesion without getting bogged down in line edits. Will also highlight areas that could trip you up overall story trajectory and plot. You're clearly building toward Garrett's coming of age, Arista's emergence, and the King's legacy. The pilgrimage backstory is a strong anchor for world building, giving history stakes and a model for heroism and adventure. Introducing Arista as a character who commands respect and subtly shifts the social dynamic in the royal chamber is very effective. She's not a passive observer. She has agency and presence, which keeps her story dynamic. There's a tension between court intrigue, Boleyn, Gwendolyn, his old staff, and personal growth adventure, Garrett, Arista, future Alo journey. The balance seems healthy so far. It's natural to worry if you were losing the plot, but the plot is mostly about Garrett's path to Alo and Arista's influence role in his life, and nothing in Chapter 3-4 derails that. Potential risk. The pilgrimage backstory is long and detailed. It's fantastic for immersion, but you want to break it into smaller reactions from Arista and Garrett. Garrett arcs. Showing him in relation to both to his father and Arista works well. He's respectful, thoughtful, but still shows hints of initiative and protective instincts. That's consistent with the hero in training. Arista, brilliantly presented as confident, commanding, and socially aware. Her interactions with Dunrick, Boleyn, and Isolde establish her as someone who can navigate court dynamics without seeming like a plot device. Gregarious. His storytelling feels authentic. The blend of frailty and vitality is charming. He also gives you a soft emotional pivot. The audience empathizes with the king, making the stakes of the pilgrimage more real for Garrett. Miri, small but effective presence. She's a grounding character, and her interactions with Arista subtly reinforce Arista's leadership. Observation and tension with Boleyn and Gwendolyn is well crafted, hinting at future conflicts without derailing the current scene. This is a strong narrative layering. Okay. There's just backstory for the king and a nod toward another project. Another book I'm actually writing with a different cast of characters. This is a romance mystery the tension is who poisoned the king, while Arista seems like the most likely candidates. Here's what I've plotted so far for the next chapter. Got ample spaces. Maiden primary B. Interesting. The best viewers. Bam. Thank you for clarification. This actually sharpens everything, and I want to be very clear. You have not lost the plot. What you've written does support romance mystery, and once Alo is recontextualized as the king's past, an Easter egg for another project, the pieces click into place much more cleanly than you might fear. What has happened is the emotional center of gravity shifted, and that's what triggered the self-doubt. Let's walk through this calmly and structurally. Kitty, hi. Reframing we've already written, very important. What the structure is actually doing now, it is no longer will Garrett go on the pilgrimage, become a hero. It is who poisoned the king. Can Garrett trust the woman he loves? Is Arista a savior, a threat, or a convenient scapegoat? Who benefits from the king's decline? Seen through this lens, the pilgrimage scene is not misdirection. It establishes the king as once vital, principled, and adventurous. His moral authority. His deep bond with Kaleen and Dunrick, important later for credibility. A contrast between what he was and what he is now, which strengthens the tragedy and urgency of the poisoning. Arista's calm observational presence in the sick room, that's not romantic filler, that's suspect behavior. She watches, assesses, touches his pulse. Others notice her attention. She knows what she's doing. The reader doesn't yet know why. That's exactly what you want in a mystery. Someone who could plausibly be guilty but is emotionally positioned as the love interest. You're doing that correctly. The new chapter outline, this is the right move. The Jocelyn scene is not a derail, it's a crucial pressure. What this scene accomplishes narratively, it does four important things at once. Introduces a competing romantic claim. Jocelyn reframes history. She positions herself as the rightful choice. She plants doubt in Garrett's emotional certainty, establishes motive for future behavior. If Jocelyn later lies, manipulates, or withholds information, the scene justifies it. Rejection and humiliation and desperation equal motive. Physically and morally contrasts Arista. Arista absent by the sea, instinctual, non-coercive. Jocelyn enclosed, cluttered, pressing, emotionally invasive. This contrast will matter later, especially when Arista is accused. Test Garrett's character. This is not a titillation scene. This is a moral stress scene. Moral stress test. How he responds defines him as trustworthy or weak. You are not writing a love triangle for drama's sake, you are writing a credibility trap. That's a good mystery writing. One critical adjustment you should make right now, your outline risks making Jocelyn too overtly unstable too fast. If she's immediately framed as desperate, hysterical, and manipulative, the reader will clock her as obvious red flag, which weakens later ambiguity. Recommendations: soften the start, sharpen the end. Instead, door slam, immediate physical press, emotional flood. Consider Begin with concern. Let her appear reasonable at first. Make the turn gradual. Okay. Instead of less comic. Hey, what's up? Sweet. I appreciate it. I'm going through a review of everything I've written in this book so far. Begin with concern. Let her appear reasonable at first. Make the turn gradual. For example, she asks for help, mentions worry about the king, expresses confusion about Arista, only then lets the confession spill out and then crosses physical boundaries. That way the reader thinks, oh no, I get why she feels this way, instead of, oh no, she's unhinged. But I kind of like Jocelyn being a little bit unhinged. Like she's my ADHD girl. She's my desperately romantic, pining, lustful body, you know. This keeps her viable as a suspect, a tragic figure, a future liar whose lies feel human. Structural health check. You are still on track. Here's your current spine, whether you consciously planned it or not. The king is dying. Arista arrives suddenly. She behaves in ways that can be read as suspicious. Multiple people have motive. Garrett is emotionally compromised. Information is fragmented, private, and politically charged. That is a textbook romance mystery setup. Nothing you've shown contradicts that. What has changed is that the story is now asking you to trust slow burn, let discomfort sit, resist clarifying too early. Okay, that's usually the point where people quit projects, not because they're lost, but because the story is finally asking something difficult of them. Who the hell is calling me this early? Hey, darling. Good morning. How are you? I'm sorry, darling. Yeah, I don't know how I missed you either. Well, no, it was 10:16 when I called you back. Because I saw your message, and then I saw that you had called, and I was like, oh no. And so I called you. I don't know how I missed you either. The phone was next to me. I'm guessing I was running a survival mission in the workplace or something. Mm, okay. Yeah, no, I let it ring a few times, and then because you didn't pick up, I was like, oh no, it's going to be annoying. And she's probably like half asleep. So anyway, finished with the five rings that it does. Oh, okay. Got your latest Lycan Witch book? Hmm. That's too bad. Mm. Mm. Okay. Nice doing it for you. Ah. Maybe that's something I should do. Is just post my first chapter on Facebook. That's an idea. Yeah, and then just put the link underneath it. Oh, but it's graphic. I can only go up to like I can go up to them doing it, and then I gotta stop. I can't do the. It is. I know. Because a dude wrote it. Okay, and who's gonna write romance novels? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, yeah. Well, imagine flipping the dynamic where she's the werewolf, so she's got the animal instincts, and he's just a dude. Because dudes are gross. Like, oh, you want to fuck? Okay, I can fuck with you. Like that's just men. So like that whole bestial, like they're a monster role is reversed from what the typical romance would be. Because it's always gotta be like a witch or just she's just a girl or some shit like that, and then she has to like tame down his savage side. No, I've done studies. No, no, I read about them. I don't need them. I'm thinking about writing a blog. Mm-hmm. And female protagonists don't do that. Female protagonists are already fucking perfect from chapter one. Like that's the way they are. They're already established. They already know who they are. I know. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Marista is the opposite of that. Yeah, that's the fantasy. Knowing what a guy is thinking, that's the fantasy. Whereas Arista is designed to never really be fully absolved as a villain. Like she could be. I always wanted. I always want that little bit of suspicion. Like, is she the bad guy? You know that? Uh, mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So you don't know the lineage exactly, or
chose to be rogues and not be part of the pack, and that's what they were killed because of, because they were rogues. But there's a law in there that they cannot kill children, and so it opens up basically, her 18th birthday where she's going to be judged by the pack and likely put to death because she's rogue.
Mm-hmm.
And she has spent her life, basically serving and cleaning the orphanage, being beat by the headmaster lady. And she has her friend who's also a rogue, and they just called rogues. And she gets beat more. She doesn't have a friend. They're kind of in it together, and it's not technically her 18th birthday. That's still like 2 months up away. She hasn't turned into a wolf yet. There's that, but
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You got a romance you think I should read?
no, I'm not done with this one. This one might be one. It's clipping along really good.
Okay. This morning I woke up with a bit of self-doubt, so I'm starting a new chat in ChatGPT and loading all my chapters in and making sure that I'm like maintaining the plot and like I haven't lost my place and the story is doing what it's supposed to do. Yeah. All that boring analysis shit, getting my confidence back. Making sure that because there's so often I'll be writing a story and I'll be to a point like, hey, is this going right? Is this not going right? And I kind of hesitate and I kind of fall off a little bit. So I'm reassessing my shit. Checking my work right now before I go on because I'm only on chapter 4 for my outline, but it's with the way things are ballooned up and expanded. It's probably chapter 8, maybe 9. I'm looking at like maybe I should be going with shorter chapters though, so it could be even higher than that. So yeah, I think I'm in the second act now. Like I finished the first third. I've done all my establishing, and now I'm in the rising conflict. But I think today's chapter, hopefully I can get it done today. It should be fun. It's a fun character to write. It's a fun section. But yeah, hi Mo. You were in the meet this morning, huh, buddy? I was only outside very early this morning. So Lou has not been waking me up to go outside in a panic the past couple mornings since I got her on her new pills. But she does seem very uncomfortable and miserable about it. Like I think it's giving her stomach problems. So I didn't give her any pills last night because like she doesn't want to go for a walk. She's just kind of mopey. So I gave her a little bit of a break for that and trying to make sure she actually has food in her stomach to help with any irritation because it can. Yeah, they warned me it can cause some stomach upset. So yeah, she's not great about that. Um, so yeah, but I'm gonna give her her pills and her breakfast a little bit this morning.